have laws.
Stranger Things Season 4 was released over the weekend on Netflix, or at least I should say the first part of Stranger Things Season 4, as it's going to be divided into two sections, the later of which is coming in July. And like many fans, I have been eagerly awaiting the release of this season. I haven't been waiting nearly as long as a lot of other people, as I was actually first introduced to this series and watched it for the first time only about less than a year ago, actually. And so I haven't been waiting nearly as long, but I loved those first three seasons. I really enjoyed the story that's being told with this series and the characters that they're using to tell it. And because of that, I was beyond excited and looking forward to this new season. And this season is significantly larger than the previous seasons. There's a lot more happening in it, something that they teased before the season even came out, and it's part of the reason for why they're dividing it into two sections in the first place. But this movie's big. I mean, this series is big, sorry. If there's one word to describe it, it would be big. There's a lot happening in that, and there's a lot of things that I would like to talk about. And so for that reason, I'm going to kind of divide this video up a little bit, just so that it's easier to follow along. But the first thing that I really want to get into and I want to talk about with this series is going to be the story. The reason that Season 4 of Stranger Things is so much larger and so much longer than any of the previous seasons really comes down to the story. For one thing, it's a much more grand, a much more impressive story being told. They have a lot higher ambitions for this season. And for a second reason is that there's really actually four stories being told in this one season. There is the story happening in Hawkins with characters like Steve, Dustin, Lucas, and Max. There is the story happening in Russia with Jim and Joyce and Murray. There is the story happening in California with Eleven and Mike and Will. And then there is the kind of branch-off story from the California story where Eleven kind of goes off on her own. So there's these four different tales being told, and that's what makes this series so much longer, is that they have to fit them all in, and it kind of bounces back between the four of them. Now, when it comes to the overall story of this series, I really liked it. I love the villain that they have. Vecna is a lot more interesting than any of the previous villains have been, and he's just a lot more fun to learn about, and the way that he goes about things is significantly cooler. And so I really, really liked the main story, but the different parts, the four different storylines being told in that story, I liked some of them better than I liked others. The one that really stood out to me, the one that I consider to be kind of the main part of this series, is the story happening in Hawkins. To me, that is where the real story is at. That's everything that's happening with Vecna. It's got all the murders, and the kids there are trying to figure out really what is happening, why it is happening, and what they can do to stop it from happening. To me, it is the most entertaining part of the story. It has some of the best character moments. It has some of the best characters of this season in that part of the story. And so to me, it is easily the standout. I always loved whenever it went back to that storyline while I was watching. My second favorite storyline has to be everything that is going on in Russia with Jim, with Joyce, and with Murray. I love to see how they're handling the character of Jim with him being in Russian prison, and sort of how he is depressed, but at the same time he's still extremely determined and he wants to get back to Joyce. I love to see how Joyce and Murray and how they go about trying to rescue him. There's just a lot of great things happening in that storyline, and I really loved it. I loved it whenever it went back to that one. Then we get into the storylines that I liked, but I didn't love nearly as much, and the first of those is going to be the story that occurs with Eleven once she breaks off from the other group of people in California. Her story is interesting, but as far as this part, I feel that it was mainly used as a way to get us the backstory needed, to get us to understand the story and everything that occurred prior and that led up to what is happening in Hawkins at the moment. And so it was just, to me, it was a lot of backstory. It was necessary, it was interesting, but it just wasn't nearly as good as what we got and what's actually happening at that moment with everything in Hawkins. And then you have the second side of the California story, which is the stuff that happens with Mike. It's the stuff that happens with Will and Jonathan. And there, for me, it just wasn't as entertaining. There are moments that are really entertaining with that storyline, but I never felt like it really got anywhere. They're just kind of looking for Elle. They're trying to figure out where she is. I didn't feel like they had a huge impact on the main story or everything that was going on there. And don't even make an appearance in the final episode of this part. They're just completely excluded. And so to me, it was just a little bit of a disappointing storyline. But overall, I still enjoyed it. And as a whole, I love the tale that's being told here. And I think that all of its parts were good to great. And I hope that they all come together and work really well in the finale in this next part of Season 4. The next thing I want to talk about with this series is the characters, and there are a lot of them in this season. Once again, you have all of your favorites from the previous seasons are returning, and they are as good as ever. I loved all of them in the parts that they played, but there were a few of them that stood out to me more than others. One of those would be Max, who has a lot occurring with her in this season, and a lot of that has to do with things that have occurred in the previous seasons and how it's all kind of coming up and how it ties her in with Vecna and stuff like that. And so she was really interesting in this series. I liked what they did with Lucas as well and kind of his conflict between wanting to become popular while at the same time sticking with his other friends, the friends that he's had for years. And so I loved seeing everything that they had going on with him. Dustin stood out to me in this season. He's been one of my favorites in all of the seasons, but in this one, he's just kind of the guy who figures everything out. He's the one who finds what's going on, who makes the guesses and kind of is putting it all together. And he does a really great job, and so I loved him in this season. I also really like Steve. I love Steve in all the seasons. He's probably my favorite character of the show. And him and Dustin's relationship in this one is as great as always, as well as his relationship with just the other characters. You start to see how much they care for Steve. Steve starts to realize it as well, and so there's just a lot to love about what occurs with his character in this series. Other characters that were returning for this season that I really enjoyed, one of them would be Murray, who in the previous seasons has always just kind of been more of a side character. In this one, he takes a little bit more of a front center person, and he has a lot more to do, and I really enjoyed that. He's a lot of fun in this season, and he just has some really great parts, some really funny parts as well, and I loved him in this one. There were a few characters of the returning cast that I didn't love as much in this series, and it's not that they are bad, they're still the same characters, it's just that they don't have as much to do with their particular storylines, and that would particularly be Jonathan, Will, and Mike. I just didn't feel like they really had a huge significant impact on this part of Season 4, and I'm hoping that they're going to get a little bit more to do in the part 2 of it. Because at the moment, I just kind of wish that they just kind of felt like they were there because they're in the previous seasons and we still want to see those characters, but we don't really have as much for them to do. So that was a little bit disappointing. Now, this season also introduces several new characters, and for the most part, I really enjoyed all of them as well. The standout for me among the new characters was Eddie, who is a friend of Dustin's. He runs the Hellfire Club, which is a D&D club at the high school. And he was great. I love him as a character. I love to see everything that he was going through this season, trying to figure out exactly who he is, and what he's supposed to do. He also just fits in great with the storyline. There's a reason for him to be in the series, and the way that he interacts with the rest of the characters as well was awesome. I really loved him. The other new character that really stood out to me was Dmitri, who's involved with the Russian storyline and everything with Hopper. You don't love him as much as the first part, but then as you continue in the series, you get to know him a little bit more. Some things happen that put him in a little bit different situations, and you start to really care for the guy and everything that he sort of represents and wants to be. And so I really liked him. I look forward to seeing more of him in the second part. You have a character named Jason. He's kind of a bully of the Hawkins area, and he actually has a pretty significant part in the series. I don't particularly love the character, but I like what he's done in this season. I think that he fits well in with the story, and it makes sense with everything that's happening with him. But as a character, he's not very likable. He is kind of a jerk. He is a bully, and so there's a mix there. But as a character, he's really well done. I really liked him. You also have Yuri. Yuri's fun, but he never really stood out to me as fantastic. But he's entertaining when he's on screen. When you have him in there, he has a part to play. It's a smaller but significant part, and so I liked him in it. The character that was new that I didn't care for all that much is Argyle, who's Jonathan's best friend. And I just feel like he didn't really factor or give much to the plot in this one. He's kind of used more as a humorous character, and he does have some moments that are pretty funny, but overall he just doesn't really offer a whole lot. He doesn't do a whole lot more than just be the driver for all of the other main characters. And so I was kind of disappointed with him. I didn't care for him as much. Maybe they'll give him a little bit more to do in part 2, but overall he just hasn't been my favorite character of this show. But overall, I think that the majority of the characters in this series have been really good, and I like to see those that are returning. I love to see how the new ones interacted with the old ones, and it's just getting bigger and bigger, and I love all of these different characters. But those are some of my thoughts on them. Let's go ahead and get into my thoughts on kind of the tone and the feel of this season. This season of Stranger Things really felt different to me. It doesn't quite have the same tone to it as what we got in Season 3 or Season 2. I just feel like the season that feels the most like this new one has been Season 1, where it kind of has a little bit more of a creepy feel as they try and go a little bit more into the horror side of things. They do that a lot with this series and with this particular season because of the villain Vecna. They try and make him as creepy as possible, and there are some genuinely really quite creepy moments with him. Some of the kills that he has are not exactly fun to watch. They're pretty gruesome and gross, and so it really does have a very different feel to it than the other seasons. I wouldn't say that I like the feel of it more than I like the feel of the other seasons that they've had, but I think that it works really well with the story that they are telling. The story of this one, like I said in the beginning, is a lot more ambitious. It's a lot bigger, there's a lot more happening, and it is a lot more scary, the kind of the events that's going on. It could go really bad, and so the tone really fits with the season. And so I enjoyed that. I liked that they fit it, and they made it feel unique. They made it stand out above the other seasons. They made it feel different, because this is, as the trailer says, this is the beginning of the end. There's going to be one more season after this, and this feels like it is setting things up for that big finale season. And it's going in a much darker route, and the tone fits with that. But because of that, I would probably say that this is not exactly a family-friendly series, unlike the previous Stranger Things seasons. And those weren't exactly completely family-friendly either, but I think that they were more so than what this one is. This has all of the other things that the Stranger Things seasons have. You know, you have your little bit of swearing, there's some sexual jokes and references and things like that. But what makes this one different from the other ones and a little bit less kid-friendly or less friendly for younger viewers is the fact that it is significantly more creepy, significantly more gory, and just the whole feel of the show is a lot more scary than what all the other previous seasons have been. So it's not one that I would really recommend younger viewers to watch. If they have watched the previous seasons of Stranger Things, that doesn't mean that they're really going to be ready for this one. I would advise you to view it before you show it to younger kids, just to make sure that they would be okay with it, because it could seriously impact some of them. They might have nightmares, it could freak them out, and that's just the way that they've designed it. It's supposed to be scary, but that means that it's not going to be for everybody. I know if I was younger, when I was younger, if I'd seen this show, it would definitely give me nightmares, and it would have me freaking out. So it's something that I would advise you to check out before you just show it to the whole family. I think that depending on what your family's like, you could watch it together. Maybe you all would enjoy it, but you just may want to avoid some viewers on this one. So that's kind of my thoughts on the tone of this show. I liked it. I liked that it was different, that it felt different, but that it worked really, really well with the story. So let's go ahead and get into my rating of this series and kind of my final thoughts on the film.
Your suffering is almost at an end.
Stranger Things Season 4 definitely lived up to my expectations. It continued to have great characters, both those who were returning as well as new characters that they brought in for this season. It continued to have great storylines, even though some of them I liked more than others, as there are a lot of things happening in this series. The overall story, though, is really good. I loved the villain of this one. I loved how all of the characters are interacting, and I love to see how they probably are eventually all going to come together in part 2. So I really liked that about this series. Overall, it's just a lot of fun. I liked the tone that they went for with it, even though that maybe isn't the tone that a lot of people are going to like, that some viewers might not enjoy. I thought it worked really good with the story that was being told. I liked that they went for a more creepy feel and tried to give it a more horror style and I thought that it was great, and I loved it about that. And so overall, I definitely would say that this one lived up for me. It's not perfect. There were elements that I didn't like. I didn't love how they used some of the characters. I didn't love some of the storylines. But overall, as a whole, it's definitely more thumbs up than it is thumbs down. And for that reason, I'm going to go ahead and give this one an A-. If there's one thing that it does, it gets me excited for the part 2 that will be coming in July. I'm beyond excited to see how this wraps up for season 4 and how it sets the stage for the finale season of this show. As a series, I would say that I don't know if it's my favorite Stranger Things season, but I really don't know. It's hard for me to rank them as I love all of them. I know a lot of people have been talking about it as being their favorite. I think this one is really, really good. I love what they told with it, but I also think that the other seasons are really, really good. The difference with this season comes in its family-friendly approach. It's not quite so family-friendly as the other ones were. It is a lot scarier than the previous ones were, and there are a lot more gruesome and terrifying moments that occur throughout this one. So it's one that I recommend that you check out prior to showing to younger viewers, just to make sure that it isn't going to have any impact on them or give them nightmares or anything like that. And so because of that, combined with the fact that it still has some of those other Stranger Things elements like some swearing and some sexual comments and references and jokes and stuff like that, there aren't many of those, but they do on occasion happen. But because of the new side of the gore and the horror of it, I'm going to go ahead and give this one a D+ on the cleanliness rating. I wouldn't say that it is like an unclean show, but just because it is a little bit more bloody, I don't recommend. I don't think it's for everyone. I wouldn't say that this is family friendly, or at least not for most families, especially if you have younger viewers who are going to be watching it with you. So anyways, guys, those are my thoughts on the new seasons of Stranger Things. I personally really enjoyed it, but have you guys had the opportunity to see it? If you have, let me know in the comments what you thought of it, and please be sure to like and subscribe so you can stay up to date on any new videos that I post, and I look forward to sharing more reviews with you coming in the future.